There was a hunter. He was chasing a deer in the deep forest. The deer dashed in front of him and came out into a clearing in which sat a sage, still and silent, but sitting with his eyes open. And the deer dashed past the sage into a thicket behind and hid from the hunter. The hunter came in to the clearing and said to the sage, "Where did the deer go?" The sage said, "I did not see a deer." The hunter said, "But you have your eyes open." And the sage said, "We in this forest are in a state of universal equality and equanimity. In this state there is no mind. And since the mind is the instrument of the senses, there is no sensory awareness. This state is beyond those three levels of life, called the awake, the dream, and the unconscious. But we would give it those other names of the sensory, sensual level, the aesthetic level of spirit, and the level of transcendence, where all appears equal to the mind. But there is a fourth state called Turia. This is where we abide. How could I see your deer? And then there's the story of a young man called Suka. Now Suka was the son of one who had, through his aesthetic practices, attained a state, what was considered to be that of an immortal. And he taught his son Suka all that he knew. And then he said to his son, "You must go for further teaching to the great King Tanaka." Now Tanaka was one who was called by a special honorific, which meant one who lives in spirit. So Suka went off to the abode of the great king. But when he arrived at the gate of the palace, a magnificent edifice, he was met by the guards, who, because of his simple garb, did not recognize him. So for 3 days and 3 nights he sat outside the palace gate in a state of peaceful contemplation. No movement of agitation was seen on his countenance. And then the guards came out, and somehow they recognized his shining countenance. Something in them recognized this princely being. So they went to tell King Tanaka, and he came out with an entourage to embrace and greet Suka, who he escorted into his magnificent palace. Now Tanaka, because of his powers, knew why Suka was there. And he said to him, "Your first lesson will be to take this bowl of milk and circumnavigate my palace 7 times without spilling 1 drop." Now King Tanaka's palace was filled with music, dancing girls, activity of all kinds. So as Suka traversed the corridors, up the stairways, through the chambers, and round, down to the kitchen, and up, circumlocuting this vast edifice with all its activities, his countenance did not change. There was no attention given to the dancing girls, the clanging of the pots and the smells in the kitchen. And he came back to King Tanaka with a bowl of milk intact. King Tanaka looked at Suka and said, "You need no lessons from me. Return to your father." What do these 2 stories mean for us? One, which bespeaks of a universality, an equanimity, equality. And the other that speaks of an attention, a focus, that, like the first story, seems to have no mind. Where do they meet, these 2 tales? In us. What does this bowl of milk represent? And what is it meant by we are in a state where the mind, that is the instrument of the senses, is no longer operational? there is no more instrument. Where do they meet?